Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the briefing room. Coming to you from the Washington Bureau of ABC News, I'm John Santucci alongside our political director, Rick Klein. So after Donald Trump started this week on a pretty high note, I got a pretty good report by his standards from Attorney General Bill Barr reacting to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's. What does the White House do first, Rick?
They try to kill Obamacare.
Yeah, that's totally a great way to spin a good story for them. We're talking about the president's new push. He joined a federal lawsuit down in Texas to support repealing Obamacare. He's been on this mission going back to the 2016 campaign trail. And here's where we are right now with the numbers. 11.4 million are currently enrolled on the exchange. The average premium for most Americans, $612. The president adamant this is the right thing to do right now. He was asked about it earlier today in the Oval Office. Take a listen to that.
Because Obamacare is a disaster. It's too expensive by far. People can't afford it. And the deductible is horrible. So the premiums cost too much. The deductible is horrible. The only difference between now and the other administration is that we're administering Obamacare very well. So we've made it better. I understand health care now, especially, very well. A lot of people don't understand it. We are going to be, the Republicans, the party of great health care. The Democrats they've let you down. They came up with Obamacare. It's terrible. We have a lawsuit right now going where phase one of the lawsuit terminates Obamacare, essentially terminates Obamacare. You know that. That's the Texas lawsuit. We think it'll be upheld, and we think it'll do very well in the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court rules that Obamacare is out, we will have a plan that's far better than Obamacare.
That's the president today in the Oval Office, coming back here in the briefing room with Rick Klein. This is sort of the mission that we've seen for Donald Trump, going back to the campaign trail. Anything that has Barack Obama's stamp on it, he wants gone no matter the cost.
And in this case, it seems to have been pushed by Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff and OMB chief. This, though, is got a lot of Republicans upset because they know that whatever the president says about we'll have something better, he's been in office for 2 years. There is no replacement plan. Actually, Republicans have tried to kill Obamacare for a decade, and they still don't have a replacement plan. We heard about repeal and replace. How about repeal and then what? Chaos. So there is no backup plan on this, and they know, Republicans know, this cost them dearly in the midterm elections. They don't want to see this as the dominant issue going into 2020.
Well, and on Capitol Hill, everyone is talking just about that, what to do right now that the president has joined this lawsuit. Let's bring it up to the commander-in-chief of our Capitol Hill unit, Trish Turner, joining us now with her favorite title that I've given her. Sorry about that, Trish. What do you think, Trish? What are members up there saying at the moment?
I think you guys hit it right on the nail on the head here. Democrats feel like they've been given a political gift. They were swimming in the darkness with the results of the Mueller report, not sure what to do, and then lo and behold, the president just dropped this gift into their lap. Republicans, you know, they want to make changes to Obamacare. They've been trying at the edges in conversations like with Democrats. I even asked the Republican leader just after the election, when everything was centered on health care. They lost the House. The Republican leader here in the Senate, he picked up a couple of seats, but he said, look, you know, the lesson is we got to do this in a bipartisan way. We're never going to get it through here. And so I was talking just minutes ago to a senior Republican senator, and I said, well, what is the appetite in the conference? And he said, zero appetite. And I said, you guys were surprised? Totally surprised by what the Justice Department did. In fact, Susan Collins, a moderate who's up in 2020, she told us, like, I don't know what they're doing. I'm so angry at the Justice Department. She's going to fire off a letter to the Justice Department, to the Attorney General, asking, what the heck are you doing?
So, okay, well, now that we've all gotten over the initial shock, I think, who are the members to watch on Capitol Hill, Trish, that are going to have to come up with something here? Because if this actually goes through and if they win this court battle to repeal Obamacare, Republicans got to come up with something to put in its place.
That's right, although interestingly, when I talked to a number of Republicans across the political spectrum, they were saying, we'll be interested to see what the president sends us, So it kind of seems like they might be trying to put the ball back into his lap, and to some degree, look, many of them up here have a lot of ideas for privatizing, insurance, for group insurance, insurance across state lines. We've heard these ideas, the three of us, we have heard them since, going back into the Bush administration. This is just not something, that you're going to get through the Hill. You're not going to get through it through a Democratic-controlled House. Even this is a rare break these days from Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the Republicans in the House, told, according to reports, and we have not been told anything otherwise by staff, not been told, they haven't batted down this report, that McCarthy told Trump, don't do this. This is not the way to win back the House. So as you're asking, like, who do we look to? It's kind of strange because there'll be some conservatives who try to put together like piecemeal plans. I talked to Ron Johnson, one of the original Tea Partiers. He won his race way back 2 terms ago on the back of Obamacare when it was tanking in popularity. Even he said today, I want to do this piecemeal. We're not, we don't need to do all that. We don't need to bite off more than we can chew. So even he wants to do that. So we actually see more bipartisan work behind the scenes to reduce the cost of like prescription drugs, something the president wants to do. They're trying to, I think what they're really hoping is to turn him in that direction as quietly and below the radar as they can.
And Trish, going back to your original point with Rick here, I mean, we're going to talk 2020 in a little bit, but if you're a Democrat running for the White House, you probably woke up Monday and said, oh, he's only going to talk about Mueller and the victory. And now you're saying, woohoo, healthcare, let's go.
It does reset things for them, doesn't it, Trish?
It's amazing. It totally resets everything up here. They took a big sigh of relief. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, behind the scenes is like, she's ready to get the goods on Mueller, but essentially it's just like, plow ahead with healthcare. Are you kidding me? And Schumer's like, well, if the Republicans think they can do healthcare, God help us, but yay, we're full steam ahead.
And the field's already reacting to it.
Oh, of course. I mean, they're much happier to talk about this than anything else. And look, they recognize, I've heard this from many Democrats, if this is about big issues, they win. They ran a campaign around Donald Trump's personality already.
Right.
And I think they saw the results of that. And now the idea of running against Mueller and Russia, that's out the window based on this report. So let them talk about this. Let them talk about Betsy DeVos and education cuts. Let them talk about meaty issues that they know unite the Democratic base.
And I think to Trish's point also, what you and your team, Rick, on the political unit saw after the 2018 midterms, healthcare was still the number one issue for voters.
By far. I mean, no one was talking about Russia. They were talking about healthcare, and you saw Republicans playing defense. The president, rally after rally, we are going to preserve pre-existing conditions. It's almost like he was Obama, trying to channel Obama on that. And I wonder if to the point of biting off more than you can chew, if there was any real calculation about what this means, because this is easily can consume the policy debate for the next couple of months.
Yeah. Well, Trish Turner, you were wondering after Monday what would be the focus up there. Have fun.
Little did I know.
Trish Turner up on Capitol Hill, thank you as always. Switching gears here in the briefing room a little bit, family leave now becoming a new topic that Republicans are talking about up on the Hill. Senators Marco Rubio and Mitt Romney revealing a plan that they support a little earlier today. Let's take a listen to Senator Marco Rubio.
Our proposal would let new parents pull forward a portion of their Social Security benefits for 1, 2, or 3 months of paid parental leave after the birth or adoption of a child. In exchange, parents can either choose to delay their retirement by about 6 months per child, or they have the option of receiving a reduced Social Security benefit during the first 5 years of retirement at an equal size. Their only other option is to either A, not have children, or B, go on public assistance or run up huge amounts of debt. The irony is, if you make $800,000 a year on Wall Street, you have it. If you make $40,000 a year somewhere else, you probably do not. Some people may choose not to take this option, but it is certainly better than having no option at all.
So here are the facts right now on unpaid leave across the United States. I think we have a graphic on that, actually. 1 in 6 Americans provide unpaid care for a disabled or seriously ill family member. Women provide almost twice the amount of family care than others. 60% of caregivers report job insecurity and financial hardships as a result of their caregiving responsibilities. Let's bring in somebody that has been personally affected by this. We're joined right now by Sarah Guillermo. She is the Chief Program Officer of Ignite, a big supporter of paid family leave. Sarah, appreciate you being with us this Wednesday afternoon. Your thoughts on what Senator Rubio and Senator Romney introduced today up on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me this morning or afternoon on the East Coast. I think it misses out on humans like me. I actually can't have kids for like 3 to 5 years because my cancer diagnosis is hormone positive. And so delaying childbirth is a big piece for me. And so I feel like that's a big component that it still misses out on the young survivors or humans like me who can't take time off or who can, but not because of having kids.
Well, and also, Sarah, I mean, the other piece of this is that, in a sense, this also is really thinking about parents having to take care of other members of the family. But in your case, and I'd love to hear a little bit about this from you, several years ago, your father was ill and you had to take time off from work to support him?
Yeah, so my dad actually got diagnosed on Obama's inauguration day, where I was in DC and had to, went through the inauguration process on the ground and then talked to my mom and my dad to hear the diagnosis. And so we've got a 10-year run on this paid leave situation in our world. And at that time, I was working for Aspire Public Schools here in California and took multiple, days, weeks, months off to care for my dad, to drive him to doctor's appointments. He unfortunately had a lot of struggles because he was diagnosed at stage 4 colorectal cancer at the time. And we had a lot of hiccups in our time in our healthcare pieces. And so it took a lot of time to be able to be with him and to care for him and to support him.
So family leave, as you know, has been a hard nut to crack for lawmakers. Almost everyone's for it, but the idea of where you find the money, do you put the burden on businesses to come up with it and potentially hurt their hiring or job growth, or do you allow individuals, as this proposal does, to kind of borrow against themselves money they get later? This will have an impact on retirement savings down the line, which is a major issue for a lot of Americans. But what about the idea of just opening up Social Security like this and say, you know what, individuals may need this transfusion of cash to allow them to do something at a part of their life, whether it's taking care of a child or taking care of a parent or another loved one at a different period of life. Taking that money away from yourself means less money down the road, but it at least frees you up right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like taking them, you either spend the money now or you take the money from later because with my dad, thanks to Obamacare, we were able to actually get better resources and get better care for him. But prior to that, it was a really large chunk of money in terms of premiums of having to pay. And then now with my own healthcare, I'm very grateful to Ignite that I have full healthcare benefits there. But there's still, out-of-pocket premiums that I have to pay for. And I just am in the middle of recovering from from the start of my reconstruction process. And so right before you go into the OR, there's, that $2,500 check you have to cut. Yeah. So it's either now, later, or where you're taking that money from.
I completely understand. Listen, my mother went through breast cancer and was fired from her job because of the time she had to take off. So a lot of families around the country deal with this, just like yours, Sarah. So believe me, I completely understand. Sarah Guillermo, thank you so much for sharing your story this afternoon. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Coming back inside the briefing room, we're going to switch gears a little bit and head down to the southern border. We're learning from our team down there that is following it that there has been a recent surge in migrants trying to cross the border. ABC's Jim Schultz has been down there watching this for us. Let's take a look at Jim's latest report.
We just wrapped up a press briefing with the Customs and Border Patrol Commissioner, where he announced essentially that he's in crisis mode.
2 weeks ago, I briefed the media and testified in Congress that our immigration system was at the breaking point. That breaking point has arrived this week at our border. CBP is facing an unprecedented humanitarian and border security crisis all along our southwest border, and nowhere has that crisis manifested more acutely than here in El Paso. On Monday and Tuesday, CBP started the day with over 12,000 migrants in our custody. As of this morning, that number was 13,400. A high number for us is 4,000. A crisis level is 6,000.
He's having to process the large number of migrant asylum seekers under bridges here. This is the international bridge that connects El Paso and Ciudad Juarez in Mexico on that side. And let's take a look over here behind this wall here. That's where they're actually processing migrants. He said in the last 3 days in this area, they've actually processed more than 13,000. They're getting to the point where they're using facilities outside bridges, basically running out of space. So as the day continues, more asylum seekers here in El Paso have actually showed up at the processing center here. Most of them, Border Patrol agents tell us, just wait at the gates for them. As there's a border fence here in El Paso, and there are pedestrian gates that they just sit and wait. Quite frankly, most of them with children, most of them with their families, and so again, they've run out of room. Border Patrol Processing Center inside, and they've had to actually do this initial screening outside under the International Bridge. We're going to continue to watch this today and keep you updated.
Jim Schultz down in El Paso for us. Thank you, sir. We appreciate that report. So here's where the numbers are right now from U.S. Custom and Border Patrol. Apparently 100,000 total apprehensions. That's just for the month of March. 40,000 children, 55,000 families, 13,000 apprehended in just a 2-day period, Rick Klein. So the president, who we know is yelling and screaming national emergency, those numbers are supporting what he's saying.
Yeah, he's got a rally tomorrow night in Michigan back on the campaign trail. I'd imagine there's a reference to this idea of the breaking point. The other political angle on this that I'm looking at is that Beto O'Rourke is going to be launching in his home state of Texas, including in El Paso, his hometown, on Saturday. He has said, well, we should be taking down walls, not building them up.
Yeah.
So these questions are real life for people in and around El Paso and around the Texas border. And it presents quite a challenge to Democrats, even as they position against this national emergency that the president has been pushing.
Well, before we leave this topic, we often try to assess from past experts and folks that have served in the government what they think of the situation right now. ABC's Devin Dwyer actually spoke with the former Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. She has a new book out. It's How Safe Are We? Take a look at Devin's conversation with Secretary Napolitano.
There is so much I want to talk to you about, a lot of headlines, but I want to start with the provocative question you pose in your book. You call this an American report card on our national security apparatus. What grade do you give our national security posture and preparedness right now?
Well, I think in some areas I would actually give us, say, an A. I think, for example, security of our commercial air traffic. We've actually pretty much eliminated the prospect of another 9/11 style attack. Some areas I would give us an incomplete. I think cybersecurity would be chief among those. We really don't have it.
You do talk about that in the book as sort of one of the two biggest threats you say we face right now. Do you think it's going to take a cyber-style 9/11 to have us get our act together?
I hope not. But one of the things I propose in my book is, look, after 9/11, we had a commission. The commission looked at all the red flags that had happened before 9/11. And what they said ultimately was a failure of imagination, a failure to see that aircraft could be weaponized, could be flown into iconic buildings like the Pentagon, like the World Trade Center. We have enough red flags now in the cyber arena to know that the possibility of a devastating attack is out there. We should have a pre-9/11 style commission. We should bring together the best minds in government and the private sector.
Why haven't we done that?
I do not know. And I think, ultimately it requires leadership at the executive level to be able to do that.
Do you think President Trump is not tuned in enough to that right now?
I think he's not. I think he's distracted. I think one of the things he's distracted by on the security front is the whole situation at the southwest border. I know that border. I've lived on it. I've walked it. I've ridden it.
And spent a lot of time in Arizona.
Exactly. I would say the border zone is an area to be managed, but it's not in crisis. It's not an emergency. It doesn't merit the kind of singular focus that's being put on it.
You talk in the book about what you call terrorism 3.0, which is the threat from within the country. Is the threat from white nationalism part of that, and is it on the rise?
Yes and yes. When I talk about terrorism 3.0, so 1.0 was the 9/11 style.
Al-Qaeda.
directed by an entity in foreign lands to the United States. Now what we're seeing is the rise of the so-called homegrown, so-called lone wolves, radicalized oftentimes by white nationalists, propaganda put on social media, and to date we haven't figured out a good way to prevent that.
And do you think it's actually
violence.
grown since you left office here in Washington? I mean, or do you think it's just that it's always been lurking and now getting more of a spotlight?
You know, I actually think it's always been lurking, but I actually think it's growing.
You do.
You know, we can speculate on a lot of reasons for that, but it's a real problem in this country, and it needs to be directly confronted.
How do you rate the current Homeland Security Secretary, Kirstjen Nielsen? How's she doing in your view?
You know, I think she's distracted. I think she's distracted by the president, who is so focused on the southwest border. And so some of these other, I think, greater risks to the safety and security of the American people don't, at least from my perspective, get the kind of attention they deserve.
She's, of course, taken a lot of heat for enforcing and implementing the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, what they call the zero-tolerance policy at the border, which resulted in the separation of families, detention of children. White House officials continue to insist that practice actually happened under the Obama administration and when you were in office. What do you say to that? Is that true?
No. There were occasions, and they were rare, where children were separated from the adults they were traveling with. That was when they were not traveling with their parents, when there were suspicions of human trafficking, things of that sort. But there was no policy.
This practice did happen, at least in some cases, and you do write in the book, limited miserable experiences with family detention happened during the Obama administration. That's a true statement.
That is a true statement.
But it just wasn't a policy, and that's the distinction that you're drawing.
That's right.
Okay. Do you think it's time to abolish ICE?
No. I think
overhaul it.
Overhaul it, redirect it. Do what we did in the Obama administration. Try to institute real priorities in terms of who actually is going to be deported.
And you can see Devin's whole interview at abcnews.com with Secretary Napolitano. And I should mention, John, John Carl and I had a chance to talk to her as well for our podcast, Powerhouse Politics. It's up this afternoon. She has such an interesting political backstory. She actually got her start in national politics as one of Anita Hill's lawyers. And she had some really sharp and interesting things to say in the book about how the Senate Judiciary Committee handled that. And of course, who was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee back in 1991?
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, indeed, who, of course, is also in the news. Really interesting. He, as we talk a little 2020 here, just last night used the occasion of a speech he gave in New York to again apologize for the way the Anita Hill hearings, the Clarence Thomas hearings were handled. He's never issued an actual apology to Anita Hill directly. Napolitano said it's really up to the vice president to decide whether that's necessary. But he recognizes what a political fault line, what a vulnerability this is for him, the fact that he hasn't said that.
Take a listen to him.
To this day, I regret I couldn't come up with a way to get her the kind of hearing she deserved. Nearly 30 years later, and I publicly apologized to Anita because she didn't get the hearing she deserved. But we all have an obligation to do nothing less than change the culture in this country.
And one of the things, Rick, we were talking about this morning, we played that clip on Good Morning America earlier, is that to see the footage of Biden when he was the chairman of that committee so many years ago, it reminds Americans how long Biden's been around.
Yeah, that's Strom Thurmond on one side of him and Ted Kennedy on the other. It is a truly different era. And to remember that 27 years ago, he was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He was already a veteran senator. And it does feel like a different era. But of course, after the Kavanaugh hearings last year, it was a fresh reminder that the issues are still relevant. And it puts more of a spotlight on the way that Vice President Biden and Senator Biden handled himself.
And he still hasn't said officially if he's running or had another gaffe or something like that?
Nothing recently. We're on to early April now as the potential window.
That's next week.
In next week. But interesting, there was buzz last week that he might announce a running mate very early. Perhaps Stacey Abrams, of course, who failed, came up just short in that Georgia gubernatorial contest. Stacey Abrams was on The View today. Take a look at some of what she had to say.
If I'm going to enter a primary, then I'm going to enter a primary. And if I don't enter the primary, my job is to make certain that the best Democrat becomes the nominee, and whoever wins the primary, that we make certain that person gets elected in 2020.
So you put that to rest now, that we don't have to even think about that anymore. So an Abrams-Biden ticket, maybe you would consider.
I am open to all number of options right now.
So if
I do not know if I'm running. I am thinking about everything. Part of my opportunity right now is that I have a number of options I didn't know about before. And it's a Senate race. It's possibly running for governor again. It's possibly running for president. And my responsibility is to take seriously the opportunity, to give credibility to those who are asking me, but to make sure I'm the right person, this is the right time, and it's the right job.
So put a pin in the idea of Biden-Abrams, at least for now.
Okay, so now what about a Senate race for her? That certainly seems like a possibility.
It is a possibility, but that's not easy. And in the presidential year, Georgia is a red state. It's a very difficult one. And I think you see with Beto O'Rourke, as well as Stacey Abrams, you could throw others like Pete Buttigieg into this. You have these ambitious younger generation of Democrats who feel boxed out in their home states because of how red they are at the national level, that actually it's easier to run for president than it is for Senate or governor. So I'm not counting her out for the presidential level, but I'm not sold on a Senate run either.
All right, we'll wait for that. Thank you, Rick Klein, and thank you for joining us on the briefing room this Wednesday. Make sure to download the ABC News app for any news anytime. You are watching ABC News. I'm John Santucci. Have a great day.